All rights reserved. We reserve all rights. Warning. This film contains red pill information. Take the blue pill now and go back to the Matrix, or stick around and go down the rabbit hole to Wonderland. There is no going back. Meet Bill Gates, philanthropist, eugenicist. Philanthropy means love of humankind, especially as evinced or demonstrated in deeds of practical beneficence and work for the good of others. Eugenics is a doctrine of progress and evolution of the human race culture, a term coined by the father of eugenics, Sir Francis Galton, the cousin of Charles Darwin, also meaning well-born, of good stock, of noble race. Seeing as the eugenics movement and organizations are always headed up by white people, I'll let you guess which race they think is the noble one. Thomas Paine said the greatest tyrannies are always perpetrated in the name of the noblest causes. C.S. Lewis said of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. At least the robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. A conscience like Prince Philip's, who said, in the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus to contribute something to solving overpopulation. Or like Bernard Berelson, member of the World Population Council, who said that if voluntary birth control methods were unsuccessful, the government should place a fertility control agent in the water supply of urban neighborhoods. The World Population Council is littered with members of various eugenics societies. From 2018 to 2020, the omnipotent moral busybodies Bill and Melinda Gates gave over $11 million to the World Population Council through the Gates Foundation. How noble of them. Yet in the exact same years they are funding a program to reduce the world's population, they are allegedly trying to stop the world's population from reducing by funding an injection program to save people from dying from an alleged deadly virus with a 99.97 seasonal flu-like survival rate. Makes perfect sense. Definitely not an oxymoron there, and only a moron would believe this man's injections are not for nefarious reasons. But where did he get these ideas from? Meet Margaret Sanger. You may know her as the founder of Planned Parenthood, the caring eugenics population control organization famous for birth control contraceptives and abortions. Strangely, Planned Parenthood recently admitted that she was a horrific racist bigot, though it's hard to understand where they could have possibly gotten a crazy idea like that from, considering the fine, upstanding, racially tolerant people she kept company with. What you may not know is that Planned Parenthood was simply the renaming and continuation of her first organization called the Negro Project, to deal with black folks and birth control strategies for the poor, black, and undesirables. That is what Planned Parenthood still is to this day.
An issue that really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population, reproductive health.
But did you come to reproductive issues as an intellectual?
When I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood. And it was very controversial to be involved.
Gee, Bill, It's hard to imagine what could possibly be so controversial about sterilizing the blacks, poor, and undesirables, but as the old saying goes, like father, like son. Of course, reproductive health issues is a sugar-coated synonym for eugenics. On December 10, 1939, in a reply letter to Dr. C.J. Gamble, written and sent by Margaret Sanger herself, she discusses how it would be worthwhile for his federation to employ a full-time Negro physician because in her experience, while the colored Negroes have great respect for white doctors, they get closer to their own members and more or less lay their cards on the table, which means their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. Settle down, Margaret. This isn't a KKK meeting. She says they do not do this with the white people, and if we can train the Negro doctor at the clinic, meaning in birth control methods, abortion and sterilization techniques, he can go among the black communities with enthusiasm and with knowledge, which I believe will have far-reaching results among the colored people, meaning depopulation. His success will depend on his personality and his training by us. She goes on to say that the black religious minister's work is also important, and also he should be trained like the Negro physician, perhaps by the Federation, as to our ideals and the goal that we hope to reach, because we do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Gee, Margaret, now where would they get that idea from? But more importantly, who is Dr. C.J. Gamble, and why was he writing to Margaret Sanger seeking eugenics advice for their federation? Dr. C.J. Gamble was none other than Dr. Clarence James Gamble, the heir of the Procter & Gamble Soap Company fortune. He was an advocate of birth control and eugenics and founded Pathfinder International. Pathfinder International is based in Watertown, Massachusetts, about 9 miles north of Milton, where Dr. C.J. Gamble lived. They are a global nonprofit organization that focuses on reproductive health issues.
That really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population, reproductive health.
But did you come to reproductive issues as an intellectual?
Family planning, code talk for depopulation, HIV/AIDS prevention and care, meaning administering poisonous vaccinations and medication, as we covered in our film Trust Ultra, Trust Naomi, and maternal health. I bet.
Right. So what happened was I went into the hospital to have my son. And the next thing I knew, I woke up and I had bandages on my stomach. Nobody never told me what it was. And up until maybe 2007, I realized that I had a cesarean. And when they went into me, they sterilized me at the same time. Going back before 2007, I got married. I left North Carolina when I was 15, moved to New York. I got married when I was 18, and my husband and I tried to start our own family. Prior to that, I kept getting sick. I kept hemorrhaging. I kept falling out, passing out, and I kept going into the hospital. And anyway, the doctor told me that I had been butchered. It did not register to me what she meant until I was referred to another doctor to see if he could, reverse the sterilization procedure that they had did on me. And he also told me that I had been butchered. Butchered meaning then I realized that I was sterilized because he explained to me what had happened, that why it was impossible for me to have a child is because they had cut, clipped, and tied my tubes and burned them. So I tried to have it reversed, but it never worked.
The organization operates in more than 15 low and middle income countries in Africa and South Asia. Does this sound familiar? As we read on Pathfinder's website, they are part of an initiative of international calls for global equity in access to COVID-19 vaccines to poorer countries, with goals to vaccinate the most vulnerable people first, including elderly people and those with underlying health conditions that should be first to receive vaccines in every country. Perfect eugenics targets. Young Henry Kissinger said the elderly are useless eaters. Well, go on, now elderly Dr. Kissinger, you useless eater. Put your money where your mouth is. You depopulate first. That's what I thought. Pathfinder is part of 170 nations participating in COVAX, a partnership led by Gavi to accelerate the development and manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines and guarantee fair and equitable access for every country in the world to deadly graphene hydroxide nano razor blade injections into the blood for those useless eaters scared and ignorant enough to take these lethal injections. And who is Pathfinder's partner, Gavi? Gavi is the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization, dedicated to immunizations for all. Gavi was set up and started using a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation pledge of $750 million back in 1999. And the Gates Foundation is a key Gavi partner in vaccine market shaping. Market meaning a financial commodity, not philanthropic. And they tell us since then, vaccines have become the Gates Foundation's biggest investment. Investment, again, being a financial term, implying a profit or larger financial return for the investment. More strange language for a so-called philanthropic endeavor. So the $200 billion question is, why have vaccines become Bill Gates' biggest investment?
There's been over a 20-to-1 return. There's been over a 20-to-1 return.
If you had put that money into an S&P 500 and reinvested the dividends, you'd come up with something like $17 billion, but you think it's $200 billion.
Here, yeah.
But you think it's $200 billion.
Here, yeah.
Gates loves to brag about the $1 billion he invested in vaccines to save the world, but neglects to tell you about the $26 billion he made this year selling them to our governments. Then we read that C.J. Gamble's Pathfinder International cooperates with ministries of health, civil society partners, community, and, are you ready? Religious leaders. Yes, religious leaders, to encourage voluntary vaccinations and behaviors that mitigate the transmission of COVID-19, because myths and misconceptions around vaccination must be combated through comprehensive public health campaigns that resonate in their societies and communities. Sound familiar? It should. Pathfinder is using the exact same techniques their founder, Dr. C.J. Gamble, was taught by Margaret Sanger, training doctors and even religious ministers to manipulate their communities into trusting vaccines and eugenics operations. So not only does Bill Gates' dad go on to become the head of Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood eugenics program, but later we find out that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been donating nearly $20 million over 21 different grants to Dr. Gamble's Pathfinder International eugenics programs, including $2.3 million for 5 grants since the COVID-19 alleged pandemic started. Not only that, but in 2012, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation bought around $102.5 million worth of Procter & Gamble's stock, roughly 1.5 million shares. What a small world. Incredibly, Pathfinder's own website states, "We thought it necessary to look at our organization's origins and in particular at our late founder's connections to the eugenics movement of his time. That review has confirmed Gamble's undeniable involvement in the practice of eugenics through the first half of the 20th century and coinciding with the founding of Pathfinder. Into the 1960s, his racially biased and unscientific beliefs clearly influenced his work in the U.S. and other countries and were manifest in his efforts to limit or reduce birth rates in certain communities, regardless of whether or not the people in those communities expressed consent with his methods. Though Gamble died in 1966, the influence of his beliefs could be traced to Pathfinder's work into the 1970s under the banner of population control, a euphemism adopted by governments and family planning organizations at the time. Governments? On May 20th, 2009, ABC News reported on the meeting of a billionaire club in a bid to curb overpopulation, which called themselves the Good Club, who agreed that overpopulation was a priority. You know, the Good Club, killing off people for the welfare of future humanity. Or as Albert Camus said, the welfare of the people in particular has always been the alibi of tyrants, and it provides the further advantage of giving the servants of tyranny a good conscience. So who is in this club of good tyrants? The Guardian tells us the Good Club held their first highly secretive meeting in the heart of New York City. What could be so highly secretive about saving the world? Shouldn't that be of public interest and benefit? To no surprise, the names of some of the members are familiar figures and known advocates of population control and eugenics: Bill Gates, George Soros, Warren Buffett, David Rockefeller, and Ted Turner. On October 8, 1973, the New York Times quoted Ted Turner, a member of the depopulation think tank, the Club of Rome, itself the founder of the eugenics program now known as UN Agenda 21, "The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in human history." In 1996, Turner said, "The total population of 250 to 300 million is ideal. That means a reduction of 95% from present levels would be even more ideal. Anyone who abhors the China one-child policy is a dum-dum." In 1998, the Baltimore Sun reported that most of Ted Turner's first donation to the UN of $22 million went to programs that seek to stall population, and that another goal of depopulation process is that the upcoming generation will submit to sterilization to save Mother Earth, or what is today known as eco-fascism. Ironically, Ted Turner, the advocate for China's one-child policy, is the father of 7 children, whose names he doesn't want you to know. According to Ted's own words, he must be a dum-dum. The Guardian tells us the Good Club meeting was called by Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and David Rockefeller in response to numerous crises that are plaguing the globe, meaning the population is a plague in their view. Yet, like Turner, Warren Buffett has 6 siblings and 3 children, and David Rockefeller has 6 siblings and 6 children of his own. Are these people qualified to be lecturing us about population control? The Good Club member with 6 kids of his own tells us the negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. So now we're getting a planetary ecosystem lecture by the heir to the massively planetary polluting Standard Oil Company, whose family members not only created and promoted the massive environmentally poisoning company Monsanto, but also sat on the board of Monsanto as the director. and also just started an international petrochemical company group in March of 2019, an industry itself responsible for 55% of the world's throwaway plastic waste and responsible for 80% of the world's atmospheric particulate poisoning, and is directly responsible for toxemia poisoning diseases from those chemicals like microencephaly that they always conveniently blame on make-believe viruses like Zika. But these eco-fascist hypocrites say that you and I are the danger to the earth, not the toxic crap that their own industries are spewing into our ground, air, and water. This is what eco-fascist billionaires do, only they call it philanthropy. Yes, but look at all of these poor third world countries, filling our rivers and oceans with plastic garbage and ruining the environment. Well, who exactly manufactured and sold it to them? I don't own a billion-dollar petrochemical bottling company. Do you? Here's an idea. Screw your shareholder quarterly profit gains and third world emerging market shares and stop making and selling them all of that crap then. Environmental problem solved. Nah, we'll just sterilize and kill them all instead. The Guardian went on to say, but some people are crying conspiracy, accusing the Good Club of being a sort of Bilderberg group for philanthropy with an equally nefarious agenda of global power politics. That idea has particular power on the Christian right of America, which has reacted angrily to the idea that the club discussed birth control and overpopulation. Why wouldn't they? And here's how philanthropists cleverly craft their cover story for lethal vaccine injections. They claim the reason people in poor nations have so many children is that they know many of their children won't survive due to their poor diet, putting them at greater risk of disease, especially virulent ones, which we now know don't actually exist. So as a defense strategy, poor families typically produce a large number of children in these times. Even if 15 out of 20 children died due to disease, 5 lived to continue their genetic lines. So the idea is to pretend vaccination is saving these kids from all of these life-ending virulent diseases rather than causing them, so the poor people won't need to have so many children. Of course, 500,000 children paralyzed from Bill Gates' oral polio vaccination won't reproduce either.
And what the developing world does not need is more children.
And I think that was the biggest aha to Bill and me when we got into this work, is we asked ourselves, of course, the same hard-nosed question you'd ask, which is, if you get into this work and you start to save these children, will women just keep overpopulating the world? And thank goodness the converse is absolutely true. So they don't do that, because women say to themselves they want 2 children to survive into adulthood. If she knows that 2 will survive into adulthood, she will naturally bring down her population. And so as soon as she starts to see that getting them vaccinated or keeping them alive during the birth, she won't have as many children. That's what we just heard from this group as well, that the older women had had more children, hoping more would survive, but the younger women are starting to plan for smaller families because they know they'll live.
They all said they wanted 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is fantastic.
Not
That's
8.
what you want. Yeah, that's what you want. Yeah.
And what the developing world does not need is more children.
Which is a crock of shit eugenics cover story, because I personally come from 2 huge, piss-poor, poverty-stricken U.S. Roman Catholic families just like these. 12 children on my father's side and 13 children on my mother's side. And only 2 out of those 25 piss-poor, poverty-raised children even accidentally died, let alone from virulent diseases. 1 died in a house fire and 1 died in a car accident. And you know what 0 of my grandparents ever said? We just want 2 of our 12 children to survive. Bullshit. Only 1 out of a dozen didn't make it statistically, and 0 died of a fever. And third world country families are no different than mine. Unless some do-gooder billionaire bitch thinks 13 black people in the middle of the jungle magically consume more resources than 13 whiteys in a U.S. suburb.
They deserve to get this vaccine first. And from there, you want to do tiering in various countries to make sure your most vulnerable populations get it. In our country, that would be
Piss poor white Roman Catholics with 12 kids on food stamps.
blacks, and Native Americans, people with underlying health conditions, and the elderly.
Whose average age of death has always been 80 years old worldwide every year, 2 years younger than the average alleged coronavirus death ages. But it is vital that we prioritize global health policy around protecting the elderly to age 84, since the entire world economy hinges around the elderly playing bingo, singing karaoke, and eating Jell-O dinners in wheelchairs in retirement homes 2 years longer.
And so we need to look at as a globe, and we're involved with many European leaders and African leaders and others in Southeast Asia to make sure there's a purchasing fund that can pull that vaccine through when it's available and get it out in wide-scale distribution.
So we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is, we need to meet a new constraint. And that constraint has to do with CO2. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy.
Get it through your head. All 4 of those equation factors are only to do with human beings, population, not cow farts or factory pollution.
So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0.
Again, the only way to get any one of these 4 numbers that are all derived from population down to pretty near 0 is to get the entire population itself down to pretty near 0.
Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. New vaccines, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Think about it. The same person who believes the earth is overpopulated wants to save your life with a vaccine. Why on earth would a guy who wants to reduce the population to close to 0 spend billions of dollars on injections to stop nature from doing that job for him for free by natural virus pandemic outbreaks? It makes absolutely no sense. Why didn't he say we need to stop these numbers from getting any larger, or simply find ways to reduce these numbers by 20%?
Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0.
And if 80% of these poor third world children all die anyway of alleged virulent diseases, then how is the earth so overpopulated? Because nobody is really dying from make-believe viruses, and that's what bothers Bill and Melinda Gates. It's all a bullshit philanthropist cover story for eugenics. But Who is Bill Gates, really? The cover story goes like this. Gates is born in 1955 in Seattle, Washington, to a filthy rich banking family through his mother's side, where he goes to Lakeside Prep School with Paul Allen, 2 years older than Gates, learns basic programming on a 5-year-old used one of these, and programs tic-tac-toe on a computer, even though that code was already around since Sandy Douglas of Cambridge in 1952. At age 17, Gates gets into Harvard in Boston 2 years after Allen gets into the University of Washington. 2 years later, Allen drops out of college and gets a job at Honeywell International Aerospace in Boston, so he can be by Bill. Then, he convinces Bill to drop out of Harvard after 2 years himself at only age 20 and come join him briefly at Honeywell, from where they both quit and go start Microsoft in Albuquerque, New Mexico, out in the middle of nowhere, miles away from either of their connections or comfort zones, where neither of them have any contacts. Or did they? You see, Kirtland Air Force Base is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the U.S. Department of Energy's who's who of government spook agencies, Sandia National Laboratories, is located there. Sandia National Laboratories recently came under the management of Honeywell in 2017. And just 50 miles north of that, we have the Department of Energy's infamous Los Alamos National Laboratory, who work with Honeywell on semiconductor devices. Here is an old room-sized quantum computer. Now, we read in August 2020 about a collaboration between U.S. National Laboratories and Microsoft to accelerate the path to a commercial-scale quantum computer, meaning a quantum computer the size of a dice. The U.S. Department of Energy announced the creation of several quantum information science research centers in support of the National Quantum Initiative, to which Microsoft is providing scientific leadership in addition to expertise and technology transfer. Microsoft is one of the 5 core founding members, along with Los Alamos National Laboratory, and Microsoft enrolled in the External Advisory Board of the Quantum Science Accelerator Center, joined by Sandia National Laboratory on Kirtland Air Force Base. What a coincidence. But what is quantum information science? We're told it is our description of the world at the microscopic level, which has implications for information science. Quantum information technology takes advantage of these fundamentally microscopic quantum properties of matter to design new types of computers, sensors, and networks, which will enable new speed, precision, and functionality. This is the nanocomputer, sensor, and network technology that they are injecting into people right now under the fake cover story of mRNA vaccines and boosters. Each injection will be adding new technology into the body, from carbon nanotubes and derivatives in the brain, to Microsoft graphene quantum dots in the blood, to hydrogel swimmers, to fractile graphene nanoantennas, to nanorouters and nanocontrollers, to graphene nanonodes and nanosensors in the veins, and also codec nano interfaces. Basically, the exact new technology needed to set up the 5G smart grid and smart cities, the Internet of Things, and the nanobiometric computer tracking systems inside of human hosts that will be needed for the Fourth Industrial Revolution or Great Reset, and the emerging surveillance capitalism markets being put into place under the guise of the COVID Trojan horse, creating the new digital transhuman man. We've already covered both Bill Gates and Microsoft's involvement in this technology and the Digital ID 2020 in great detail in both of our films, Once Were the Living, and in Part 2, Important Information on Coronavirus 5G Kung Flu, if you want more details. The National Quantum Initiative Act, which allows the Department of Energy to set up this surveillance capital system and fast-track the legality of this technology, was signed into law by President Donald Trump on December 2018. Q clearance is the United States Department of Energy's security clearance required to access top-secret restricted data in this subject, but that's none of my business. In fact, Trump gave $1.16 billion of U.S. taxpayer money to Bill Gates through Gavi and Pfizer to get this technology into your bloodstream. Trust the plan. Now you know why they won't tell you what the plan is.
You know what? I believe totally in your freedoms. I do. Bree, you got to do what you have to do. But I recommend take the vaccines. I did it. It's good. Take the vaccines. But no, that's okay. That's all right. You got your freedoms. But I happen to take the vaccine. If it doesn't work, you'll be the first to know.
And look, I guess in a certain way, I'm the father of the vaccine because I was the one that pushed it. You know, to get it done in less than 9 months was a miracle. Fauci said it would take 3 to 5 years. He thought it was something that just wouldn't be that effective because it would take so long to get. I pushed the FDA like they have never been pushed before. I wouldn't exactly say they're in love with me. I pushed them like they've never been pushed before, and that's why we have it. When they did the pause on Johnson & Johnson, I thought that was a very, very stupid thing to do.
Let's take a deeper look at this phantom government secret agent spook, Bill Gates. The first blatant giveaway is that William Henry Gates III calls himself Trey, a nickname for three, the third William Henry Gates in his male lineage, which makes his father, William Henry Gates Sr., born in 1925, the second. So far, so good. Which makes his father, Bill Gates' grandfather, born in 1891, the very first William Henry Gates in the family lineage. But now we have a problem, because it turns out his father, born in 1860, is also William Henry Gates I. We see his father is Joseph Stanton Gates, so he is truly the first William Henry Gates. So the pear-shaped Microsoft mathematical genius with no Adam's apple can't even count to 4? Let's get an expert's second opinion. Count us off.
That's one. One bat. Two bats. Three fabulous flyers. What? Nothing? Where's the confetti? Where's the balloons? Isn't 3 the number of the day? Oh, we're not finished counting. Ha! 1, 2, 3, 4 all together. The number of the day is 4.
You see, only a biological son can carry on the male lineage name, not a daughter. That vagina between Billy Henrietta Gates' legs isn't the only big secret her family is keeping from you. Bill Gates is a direct descendant of many of the peerage families. Burke's Peerage is the official record of the most important offspring genealogy in our manufactured history. They describe themselves as the definitive guide to the genealogy and heraldry of historical families worldwide. Their records include the peerage, baronetage, knightage, and landed gentry of the United Kingdom, the prominent families of Ireland, the Commonwealth nations like Scotland, the imperial, the royal families, and the mediatized families of Europe and Latin America, but also the presidential and distinguished families of the United States and the ruling families of Africa, the Middle East, and the Pacific Islands. A mediatized family is a family put into a middle or intermediate position and used as an instrument by their superior, to be brought down to the rank of mediate vassal from that of immediate vassal of the Holy Roman Empire, to become immediate vassal of the Holy Roman Empire. A vassal of the Holy Roman Empire is a bondsman, a slave, a subordinate, a dependent, one receiving protection in return for homage and allegiance. Basically, these families are the Vatican's bitches. It would take 3 hours to go through the entire peerage of the Gates family and all of the bankers, politicians, and celebrities he is related to, but we've laid out a small few of key interests through his bloodline's peerage and intermarrying. Through his Curtis line, he is related through the Lowes to John Kerry, and through the Lincolns to Sir Robert Crane, the first Baronet of Chilton. Also Sir Robert Walpole, the first Earl of Orford, regarded as the first de facto Prime Minister of Great Britain and the longest-serving British Prime Minister in history, serving 20 years, and also to Winston Churchill and the Churchill family, another important historical Prime Minister. Through his Curtis Palmer line, he is related to Sir Charles Palmer, the first Baronet, the coal coke fuel mogul, shipping magnate, and later the director of the Suez Canal. Gates is also related to not Robert, my bad, but Roger Palmer, the first Earl of Castlemaine, later the English ambassador to the Vatican. Through the Palmers, Gates is also related to the Vaughan family, Baronet Sir Robert Howell Vaughan, Hugh Vaughan, the High Sheriff of Merioneth, and 3rd Baronet Robert William Vaughan, who married into the famous Lloyd banking mogul family through Frances Margaret Lloyd. Lloyd's is one of the big 4 clearing banks in Great Britain and the largest retail bank in Britain, and was set up by Sampson Lloyd and John Taylor, who just happens to be another of Bill Gates' relatives through his mother, Mary Maxwell's bloodline. Through the Gibbs line, Bill is related to Henry Hucks Gibbs, the first Baron of Aldenham and the governor of the Bank of England in 1870. We get up Gates' father's line to Israel Gates, who was the son of Prudence Gates, who herself was a Billings, the family of Frederick H. Billings, the president of the Northern Pacific Railway, who founded Billings, Montana. Remember that. Israel Gates' father is Ensign Simon Gates, himself the son of Mary Gates Forbes. Notice she and her brother John have had their names washed to Phobes, despite all of the siblings and the parents being listed as Forbes. This is how these families often hide their identities. She was the daughter of Deacon Caleb Forbes, who was the son of Colonel John Forbes, whose mother Christian was a Barclay, from the English banking Barclays dynasty. The Forbes family is one of the wealthy Boston Brahmin families that got their fortune from trading opium and tea between North America and China. China. And is the family that John Forbes Carey comes from. So now we have Bill Gates related to John Kerry through both the Gates-Forbes line and his Curtis Low line. As you've noticed, he is from a long line of banking families, but his mother's Maxwell line is where things really start to get interesting. Gates has distant ties through his Dutch Maxwell Phillips line to the Bush family, which could be an entire film in itself, but for time's sake we want to go look at his other Maxwell lines. Back to the Taylor line, where we saw him connected to John Taylor of Lloyd's Bank. We have Gates related to Lemuel and Ellie Bowers, the Comstock gold mine millionaires in Nevada. Funny enough, their haunted mansion is a popular ghost hunter destination today. Eiley did crystal ball readings and seances and converted to Mormonism, which is interesting because the founder of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith Jr., is the son of Lucy Smith, the daughter of Lydia Mack, who just happens to be the daughter of Daniel Gates Jr. and Lydia Gates. And that Bowers family traces down to Samuel Bowers, the founder and imperial wizard of the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Sit down, Margaret. The Maxwell Taylor Bowers bloodline also gets us to the Reverend Frederick Taylor Gates. The fact checkers are correct in saying that Frederick Taylor Gates is not Bill Gates' grandfather through either his father or his mother's immediate line. What they are either hiding or unaware of is that they are nonetheless related through the Taylor Bowers lineage and have once again married into other parts of the Gates peerage lineage. This time through Frederick Taylor Gates' mother, Nee Bowers, or Sarah Jane Gates Bowers. Wikipedia admits Gates was the son of Sarah Jane Nee Bowers Gates. Frederick Taylor Gates was the principal business and philanthropic advisor to the major industrialist John D. Rockefeller. We now know what billionaire philanthropy really is. And remember, John's son David is a member of the Good Club with Bill Gates. We read that Gates became the Rockefellers' key philanthropic and business advisor, where he oversaw Rockefeller's investments. John D. Rockefeller nominated Gates as his senior business advisor. In this capacity, Gates steered Rockefeller's senior money predominantly to syndicates arranged by the investment house of Kuhn, Loeb, and J.P. Morgan. Although Gates is recognized today as a philanthropic advisor, Rockefeller himself regarded Gates as the greatest businessman he had encountered in his life, skipping such prominent figures of the time as Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, and even himself. By now, most of us know the story of Rockefeller and Carnegie turning healthcare and medicine into capitalism, creating the monstrous disaster known as allopathic medicine in America, meaning blaming fake viruses and blaming our janitorial bacteria for disease, suppressing bodily detox healing systems with lifelong toxic prescription petrochemical drugs, rather than curing the real psychological, mineral deficiency, and toxemia causes of disease, and how they literally destroyed naturopathic and homeopathic medicine by going after any doctors who wouldn't take their quack allopathic, state-licensed medical educations and degrees. You can read the Flexner Report for more details. Not that you can ever trust Wikipedia, but they make a startling claim here. They say although Rockefeller himself believed in folk medicine, meaning naturopathic and homeopathic plant medicine and therapies, the billionaire listened to his experts, and that it was Gates who convinced him that he could have the greatest impact by modernizing medicine, especially by reforming medical education, sponsoring pharmaceutical research to identify cures, and systematically eradicating debilitating diseases through pharmaceuticals. In 1901, it was Gates who designed the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, of which he was the board president. You might be asking yourself, How was a religious Baptist minister turned oil financial businessman qualified to start and manage an institute for medical research? He wasn't. And we have the exact same problem again today, when in 2017, the morons at Politico named Bill Gates as the world's most powerful doctor. Except he's not a doctor. He's a computer software mogul turned vaccine investment businessman. Meet the world's most tasty watermelon, pizza. This history is important because it was Frederick Taylor Gates' son, Frederick Lamont Gates, who was the doctor at Fort Riley, Kansas in 1917, giving the camp 3 injections in 3 weeks of a highly toxic experimental bacterial meningitis vaccine, contributing toward the sickness and death they later called the Spanish flu. The fact-checkers even add that his father, Reverend Frederick Taylor Gates, also participated in the meningitis vaccination process, and that Gates Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research carried out a large-scale bacterial meningitis vaccination on the whole U.S. Army in 1918, supervised by Frederick L. Gates. We've already covered in great detail at the end of our film, Biochemistry Debunks Corona, how the endless vaccines and boosters killed only the vaccinated in 1918, and how the public was conned into believing that the returning soldiers who were sick and dying from the Army vaccination program were contagious, so the public needed to be vaccinated to protect them from catching the soldiers' fake Spanish flu virus. And you can pause and read these 2 screens as well for more information. It will take too long to go over that information again here. Just know that Bill Gates' relatives were doing the exact same thing back then that Bill Gates is doing himself again today. If you're wondering how 20 to 50 million people died back in 1918, practically the entire population had been injected with up to 12 different toxic shots and booster serum variations, while the poor soldiers were all given 14 to 25 shots and booster variations. If you think these crazies are going to do any less than that to you today with their endless variant scare stories and boosters, then you simply don't understand how Bill Gates intends to make $200 billion profit off of injecting you. So far, he's only made $26 billion off of 2 shots and 1 booster. Where do you think the other $174 billion are going to come from, if not endless variant boosters? They're already making up Delmicron, a super strain hybrid between Delta and Omicron.
There's been over a 20-to-1 return.
If you had put that money into an S&P 500 and reinvested the dividends, you'd come up with something like $17 billion, but you think it's $200 billion.
Here, yeah.
Never forget, money is a secondary motivation for these people. Depopulation is always the goal of these eugenics-driven philanthropists, which leads us back to the Maxwells. Bill Gates' mother is Mary Maxwell Gates. Through her father's bloodline, Gates traces back to the Burke's peerage relatives of James Clerk Maxwell, known for Maxwell's equations and inventing the theory of electromagnetic radiation, the first theory to describe electricity. Here, we have another Department of Energy connection for Gates, and Maxwell's equations are vital for developing the nanomagnetic technology necessary for the bioelectric sensors and energy harvesters that will interact with the nanotechnology in the vaccine injections, which may just be a coincidence. Speaking of coincidence, the self-proclaimed father of this rushed vaccine technology had an MIT electrical engineering and radiation physicist uncle, John George Trump, whose daughter Karen Trump left New Hampshire, moved to Los Alamos, New Mexico, and married the MIT physicist John Charles Ingraham, who works at Los Alamos National Laboratory. Isn't it a small world, though? Gates' mother was a school teacher with a bachelor's degree in education. Somehow, she became the first female president of King County's United Way, once the largest nonprofit organization in the U.S., where she served with IBM's CEO John Opel, who released IBM's first personal computer. Yes, that one. King County itself is named after William R. King, former U.S. diplomat, senator, and vice president. Gates then becomes the first woman to sit on the board of directors for First Interstate Bank, the 8th largest banking company in the U.S. and now Wells Fargo. Then she gets on the board of directors for Unigard Security Insurance Group and Pacific Northwest Bell, an AT&T telecommunications company, and she also sat on the board of governors for the University of Washington. That's one hell of a school teacher. How was she qualified, and how did a woman rise to such positions back in the pre-feminist era? As it just so happens, her paternal grandfather, James Willard Maxwell Sr., was the president of the National City Bank in Seattle for 20 years and a director for the Seattle branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. Not only that, but his son, James Willard Maxwell Jr., Mary's father and Bill Gates' grandfather, was himself a prominent banker in Lincoln, Nebraska, who later moved to King County, Washington. Gates is related to the Lincolns of Nebraska through his Curtis line. Not only that, but the First Interstate Bank that Gates' mother sat on the board of directors for has its origins and headquarters in Billings, Montana. Bill Gates is related to the Billings family of Montana through his father's side. What is also interesting about Mary Gates' father being a prominent Lincoln, Nebraska banker, and Mary herself being president of the United Way in King County and sitting on the board of directors of First Interstate Bank System, is that one of the original banks in First Interstate Bank System belonged to Charles Henry King, who was a major business mogul and banker from Omaha, Nebraska, 35 miles from Mary's father in Lincoln. Charles Henry King was a Freemason and the grandfather of President Gerald Ford, and Bill Gates just happens to be related to both of them through his father's Gates bloodline. Through Mary Gates Maxwell's mother's line, Bill's grandmother was Adele Maxwell Thompson. His great-grandmother was Ida Thompson, whose sister, Bill's great-aunt, was Fleda Bella Moak, the wife of Gaston Moak, who emigrated from the Swiss banking capital Bern, Switzerland, to Montesano, Washington, as you do, about 70 miles from where Bill grew up. Bill's great-uncle Gaston Moak owned a jewelry store, served as the city treasurer, was president of the Chamber of Commerce several times. He headed the Ingalls, and he headed the Knights of Pythias. I repeat, he wasn't just a member, he headed the Knights of Pythias. The Knights of Pythias is a fraternal secret society and the first ever fraternal organization to receive a charter under an act of the United States Congress. And here's why you've never heard of them.
Why is that, ladies?
It's because in 1923, when the Ku Klux Klan came to Lexington, Illinois to recruit new members, at a rally of more than 3,000 KKK members in attendance of the initiation ceremony of more than 100 new Klansmen, the Knights of Pythias announced to the crowd that nearly 40,000 Knights of Pythias had joined the Ku Klux Klan the previous Tuesday night. By November of that year, the Knights of Pythias's newspaper column in the local Lexington Unit Journal newspaper estimated that 80% of their members were also Klansmen, and that 60% of the local KKK were members of the Knights of Pythias. It is through Gaston Moak that Gates is distantly related to Ted Turner, another billionaire eugenicist and member of the Good Club.
Brother Ted Turner on the cover. Ted, where you at?
And now for your million-dollar question. Is the conspiracy theory true? Are Bill Gates and Ghislaine Maxwell first cousins? That answer is easily proven as no. The fact checkers at Reuters are this time correct. They are not first cousins. But are they related to each other? While I was personally unable to definitively prove it, I can show you why there is reason to suspect it. Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Sir Robert Maxwell, was the infamous British media proprietor, former member of parliament, Israeli spy, and fraudster. He was knighted nonetheless. But that is not his real name. His real name is Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hoch, or Hosh. Very similar but different Ashkenazi meanings to Mok and Blok. The first weird thing we notice is that Robert Maxwell, aka Jan Ludwig Hoch, had a brother also named Jan Ludwig Hoch. Who the hell gives two of their sons the exact same name? The second thing we notice is that Maxwell's genealogy page was just updated a month ago, December 3rd, 2021, by Sam Katz. Why? The third thing we notice is that a man allegedly born in the Ukraine, who lived and was knighted in England and died in the Canary Islands, was buried on Mount Olive, Israel, in Jerusalem. What? The last strange thing is that you don't get buried on Mount Olive unless you are an important bloodline. Yet this knighted important man's father, Mekkel Hoch, is the last known lineage of Robert Maxwell. We know nothing about who his mother and father are. Then how do we know he is who we are told he is? What did Simon Goodman do on July 16, 2019, when he updated Maxwell's father's genealogy? He obviously scrubbed it. But when we take Ghislaine Maxwell's mother, Robert Maxwell's wife, Jeannie Maxwell Maynard, back through her genealogy, her Maynard family line origins mysteriously stop and disappear with Jacques Maynard from Vaucluse, France, only 39 miles from where Gates' great-uncle Gaston Mok is from in Bern, Switzerland. Of all the places in this great big world, what are the odds? Later, we find out that Robert Maxwell's daughter Isabel, Ghislaine Maxwell's sister, speaking here at Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum, was married to Dale Geraci, the son of the scientist credited with creating the eugenics birth control pill. Probably just a coincidence. Also coincidentally, as Bill Gates and Microsoft were either making, buying, or stealing the Microsoft DOS program that government agencies and most all home computers would eventually run on, the Maxwell sisters were simultaneously making the Magellan, Excite, and later Promise software, an Israeli secret surveillance backdoor into all computers that would be programmed into all of those Microsoft government agency databases. But just because their father was a spy and a fraudster doesn't mean his daughters who were making computer spyware were spies, right?
The number of the day is 4.
Was reported at that time that you had a number of meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, who, when you met him 10 years ago, he was convicted of soliciting prostitution from minors. What did you know about him when you were meeting with him, as you've said yourself, in the hopes of raising money?
I had dinners with him. I regret doing that. He had relationships with people he said, would give to global health, which is a interest I have. Not nearly enough philanthropy goes in that direction. Those meetings were a mistake. They didn't result in.
Such good memories. Those meetings on Epstein Island resulted in something that Gates still refuses to talk about.
What he purported, and I cut them off. That goes back a long time ago now. There's so there's nothing new on that.
It was reported that you continue to meet with him over several years, and that, in other words, a number of meetings. What did you do when you found out about his background?
Well, and, I've said I regretted having those dinners, and there's absolutely nothing new on that.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead, so in general, you always have to be careful. And I'm very proud of what we've done in philanthropy. Very proud of the work of the foundation. That's what I get up every day and focus on.
Well, that was awkward. And that's the problem with these eco-fascist psychopaths like Ted Turner, Bill Gates, David Rockefeller, George Soros, Anthony Fauci, and their likes. They have really convinced themselves that killing off most of us through lethal injections and controlling the survivors through an injected digital biological surveillance technocracy is the only way to save our planet. As if for the first time in history, our mighty Mother Earth can't take care of herself. We have white eugenics turd bags like Stanley Johnson writing books saying we don't want to kill and sterilize you all, but if you don't stop we have no choice. We have his son, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who is writing the exact same thing on his blog back in 2007 and is now trying to inject you. And if you are too dumb to see through this, they are going to remove you from the planet by injection. This eco-fascist mentality has even spilled into pop culture.
Like anytime the deer population gets out of control, some dude would literally get on TV and be like, all right, the deer population is up to about 1,800. Realistically, we need to get that number down to about 5, 6 of them, all right? So start them off, you got a gun, fucking shoot one in the face. I'm just sitting at home like, what are the deer doing that's so bad for the environment, They're gonna eat all the fucking grass. They're coming up to trees, just nibbling. Just nibbling. Dude, the deer didn't put a hole in the ozone layer, all right? That's not a bunch of dogs clogging up the freeways. It's us, right? We can fuck all we want. No one's gonna stop it. You could have 15 kids, have a 16th on the way. No one's gonna get on TV and be like, all right, Paul is still fucking. Start them off, you got a gun, fucking shoot him in the face. Do what you gotta do, this guy, he's out of control. No, it's great. It's great, man.
There were a lot of strange stories going around about all of the Walmart closings during the fake outbreak, which is unusual since all of the other major corporations and corporate shopping outlets remained open. Some even went so far as to say that Walmarts were being prepared as FEMA camp holding facilities for those who didn't take the lethal injections, because it wasn't the first time Walmart has been used for holding facilities.
Michael, good morning to you. That shelter is just behind me. If it looks like a Walmart, that's because that's what it used to be. It now houses boys from the ages of 10 to 17 years old. They spend 22 hours a day inside of that facility. And for the first time, we were part of a small group of journalists allowed inside. What we saw, they are nearing capacity, and space is now running out. And so many people have been asking what happens to those children once they're separated from their parents. Well, they're brought here to a facility where they're taken care of by the federal government. This is as far as our cameras are allowed to go. You can see it says keep out, private property. And this facility is so big, it used to be a Walmart supercenter.
And this is what it looks like inside. This footage shot by the Department of Health and Human Services during a tour we took of the facility. This mega shelter is nearly at capacity, close to 1,500 boys, 10 to 17 years old. Since May, nearly 700 children have been separated from their parents. At this facility in Brownsville, children are allowed 2 calls a week and are allowed outside only 2 hours a day.
Thank God Bill Gates' family isn't related to Walmart's Waltons, or there might be reason to worry. Oh!
You see, the reason you want to be better is the reason why you aren't. We aren't better because we want to be. Because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because all the do-gooders in the world, whether they're doing good for others or doing it for themselves, are troublemakers. We white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, British, German, American, have been on a rampage for the past 100 or more years to improve the world. We have given the benefits of our culture, our religion, our technology to everybody. And we have insisted that they receive the benefits of our culture, even our political styles, our democracy. And having conferred these blessings all over the place, we wonder why everybody hates us. See, because sometimes doing good to others, and even doing good to oneself, is amazingly destructive. Because it's full of conceit. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, then you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. So we don't know. When we interfere with the processes of nature and breed efficient plants and efficient animals, there's always some way in which we have to pay for it. And I can well see that eugenically produced human beings might be dreadful. We could have a plague of virtuous people. Do you realize that? Any animal considered in itself is virtuous, does its thing, but in crowds they're awful. Don't please breed us down to a few excellent types. Excellent for what? We never know how circumstances are going to change, and how our need for different kinds of people changes. So you see, here again, the problem comes out in genetics. We do not really know how to interfere with the way the world is. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. Then we have to fix this birth thing. Pills for everybody. We don't know. And what seems a good thing today, or yesterday, like DDT, turns out tomorrow to have been a disaster. So therefore, beware of virtue. Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, the highest virtue is not virtue, and therefore really is virtue. And they usually create trouble. Because more diabolical things are done in the name of righteousness. But inferior virtue cannot let go of being virtuous, and therefore is not virtue. Translated in more of a periphrastic way, the highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. In other words, when you breathe, you don't congratulate yourself on being virtuous. But breathing is a great virtue. It's living. When you come out with beautiful eyes, blue or brown or green as the case may be. You don't congratulate yourself for having grown one of the most fabulous jewels on earth. So it's just eyes. And you don't account it a virtue to see, to entertain the miracles of color and form. You say, oh, that's just... But that's real virtue. Virtue in the sense, the old sense of the word as strength, is when we talk about the healing virtue of a plant. That's real virtue. But the other virtues are stuck on. They're ersatz, they're imitation virtues. Because, as Confucius said, the goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. Which is the form of our own proverb, the road to hell is paved with good intent.